There's a gentle yet powerful secret hidden in every whisper of silence. The healing silence. Lessons from Chico Xavier reminds us that often it's within the emptiness of words that the answers we seek quietly dwell, and that the noise of the world merely masks the truths already resonating within us. But there's something few people realize about that silence. It isn't just the absence of sound. It's a gateway, an invitation to listen to what has never been spoken, to see what insists on remaining unseen. In this journey, it's impossible not to mention Allan Kardec, the great codifier of Spiritism. His insights echo like an invisible thread, connecting every spiritual practice and understanding that Chico Xavier so gracefully embodied in his life. Together, Kardec and Chico remind us that silence is not just stillness. It's the place where the spirit finds its own voice. Imagine, just for a moment, the soft touch of the wind on a crisp morning. The distant murmur of a river flowing, unconcerned with time. That is the inner silence, a space where emotional healing emerges not as something forced, but as something gently discovered. As we walk through this theme together, we'll find ourselves in the forgotten corners of the soul, where Allan Kardec traced the first steps for Chico Xavier to bloom in words and acts of compassion. Each, in their own way, understood that silence is the soul's most intimate language. Don't expect ready-made answers. This video does not offer exact maps, but rather clues. It doesn't dictate truths. It lights lanterns in the places where your own voice still longs to be heard. For sometimes, the greatest lesson isn't in what we say, but in what we learn to listen to. And as we surrender to that inner silence, we discover a subtle dance of intuitions that carry us further than we ever thought possible. But what if this is just the beginning of an even deeper journey? An invitation to rediscover the inner peace that Allan Kardec and Chico Xavier always nurtured, and that still whispers in the quietest corners of our memories. Now, allow yourself to sink in slowly. Feel the invisible texture of this narrative. Breathe in each word as if breathing in a new dawn, and realize that, in the end, it may be only in silence that everything truly makes sense. 1. Silence as a bridge to the soul. It's in the silence where we discover the voices we've been holding inside us. Chico Xavier. When we think of silence, we often imagine something empty and lifeless. But to Chico Xavier, inner silence was like a river flowing beneath ancient stones, invisible, yet always in motion. He believed the soul finds its way back to itself through silence. So, every breath, every pause, every moment without words carries a vibration that resonates louder than any sound we could ever hear. In our daily lives, we're surrounded by noise that fills every corner of our minds. The hustle of the cities, the murmur of our worries, the constant chatter of our thoughts. Yet behind it all, there is a place that remains untouched, a space where inner peace quietly blooms, where emotional healing begins to reveal itself. In this sense, silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of the soul. Chico Xavier taught us to turn inward. He said that silence doesn't have to be uncomfortable. It's like a secret garden where we can converse with our own feelings without fear. In that garden, every fallen leaf is a forgotten thought. Every flower that blooms, a memory returning to life. And so, we cultivate within us a spirituality that soothes, that heals, that brings us back to ourselves. Perhaps that's why inner silence is so transformative. Because in it, we're no longer defined by labels or expectations. In it, we're simply what we've always been. A soul in search of emotional healing and inner peace. And when we find that place, we realize we don't need external answers. The spirituality Chico Xavier shared is born when we pause to listen to what beats beneath the noise. And it's precisely at that point that silence reveals its power. Instead of filling spaces, it expands them. It creates an invisible bridge between who we are and who we have yet to become. Like a mirror that doesn't just reflect images, but also hidden truths. And each time we cross that bridge, something inside us reconciles with the past, the present, and what we still don't understand. Yet, it isn't always easy to sustain that stillness. Silence can scare us because it forces us to face the parts we've been avoiding. But Chico Xavier reminded us that in facing those parts, real emotional healing resides. Because what we fear most in the silence is, in truth, what most needs to be heard. It's as if every heartbeat becomes an invitation to dive even deeper. As we allow ourselves to go deeper, we start to notice details that once seemed invisible. The rhythm of our breath, the vibration of a thought, the lightness of a fleeting moment. And we realize that inner silence is not just an absence of noise, but also the most intimate presence of our own essence. It connects us to something greater, something that Chico Xavier always understood. The soul speaks in the language of calm. But there's one detail that changes everything. Silence doesn't end here. It leads us to something even deeper. The practice of deep listening. 2. When we learn to hear the silence, we discover the soul has much to say. Chico Xavier. There's something almost magical in the way Chico Xavier listened to the world. For him, listening was an act of compassion, not just with words, but with the heart. It was as if every phrase became a bridge to touch what truly matters. And in the silence of his prayers, he found the language that goes beyond all noise. The deep listening that only blossoms when we surrender to inner silence. This practice isn't just a technique. It's a gesture of love. When we truly listen, we offer the other and ourselves a safe space where emotional healing can take root. Chico Xavier understood that hearing isn't just about capturing sounds. It's about embracing what the other is too afraid to express. It's like walking barefoot over a field of memories, feeling every texture, every sigh. He reminds us that behind every silence lies a universe of feelings. And when we learn to honor that quiet, we create a connection that transcends time and space. As if every pause were an unspoken prayer, a silent plea for understanding. Chico Xavier showed us that true spirituality doesn't dwell in lofty words. It flourishes in the inner silence that accepts everything without judgment. Deep listening is an invitation to humility. It's letting go of the need to respond and simply being present. And in that simple yet powerful act, answers arise that words alone could never offer. This practice becomes even more meaningful when we remember the challenges of our daily lives. The voices around us, both external and internal, often drown out what truly matters. But when we pause to listen, with the same patience Chico Xavier had, we begin to notice the signals the soul sends. And we understand that inner peace is built in that silent dialogue. But deep listening requires courage, because when we create space for the other, we also hear our own inner voices. Sometimes they are old wounds, unresolved fears, or forgotten dreams. And all of this invites us into a path of emotional healing. As if the act of listening were also an act of healing that begins within. In that silence filled with meaning, a spirituality emerges that goes beyond any belief system. It's a state of presence, where everything that exists has its rightful place. Chico Xavier reminded us of this when, amid the world's pains, he chose silence as both shield and bridge. Because it's in that silence that we find the strength to reconnect with our essence. And so we learn that the practice of deep listening is like a dance between the soul and the silence. A movement that allows us to realize that sometimes the answers are already there, suspended in the air, waiting only for the courage to hear them. But there's one detail that changes everything. That listening isn't the end, but a gateway to something even more profound. 3. In the inner silence, a space where words cannot reach. In the inner silence, there is a space where words cannot reach. Chico Xavier understood this better than most. He said that when we quiet the voice, we give the soul space to speak, and that language changes everything. Silence acts in the spiritual field like a gentle breeze touching the surface of a tranquil lake. It stirs soft ripples, reflections that reveal what was once hidden. It's in this sacred space that emotional healing begins. Spirituality, so precious to Chico Xavier, isn't made only of prayers or rituals, but of that silent presence that holds each emotion without judgment. In silence, the mind finds rest, and the soul, freed from external noise, discovers the inner peace we so often seek in the world's clamor. But there's something even deeper. When we surrender to silence, something within us aligns with a slower, more organic rhythm, like the gentle flutter of a butterfly in a forgotten garden. That harmony awakens an almost invisible strength, nourishing the spirituality that gives us the courage to face our own shadows. Chico Xavier always taught that spirituality is, first and foremost, a state of listening. In silence, we stop trying to control life and instead participate in it. It's as if every breath were a note of music composing a larger symphony, and every pause an invitation to recognize that we don't need all the answers, because silence already offers us the most important ones. And at that point, we begin to see that silence is much more than the absence of noise. It's the frame that gives meaning to the painting of our existence. It expands our perception, opens doors we'd never notice if we were distracted by words or constant noise, like a subtle echo guiding us along invisible paths. That silent movement has the power to transform the way we relate to pain. For in silence, there are no barriers, only surrender. And when we surrender, something within us reorganizes. The spiritual field, free from distractions, becomes fertile ground for emotional healing to flourish. It's as if, in withdrawing, we give life permission to surprise us. It reminds us that sometimes the most important thing is not what we say, but what we have the courage to feel, even when we say nothing at all. Silence then becomes a universal language that touches the heart of anyone who dares to listen. But there's something few understand. The silence in the spiritual field is not an end in itself, but a gateway to something even more transformative. 4. The difference between silence and inner retreat. There's a fine line between staying silent and truly withdrawing within. Chico Xavier, with his unique sensitivity, understood this difference like someone reading an ancient poem. With care and reverence, to stay silent can be an act of fear, of someone running from themselves. But to retreat, that's a silent embrace of the soul. It's like a tree drawing in its branches during winter to bloom even stronger in spring. When we choose silence, we're often just trying to avoid confrontation. We want to escape discomfort, to flee from what makes us uneasy. But when we retreat within, we find a space where emotional healing can finally take root. In inner silence, we stop fighting the shadows and begin to listen to them. And in that act of acceptance, spirituality finds fertile ground to grow. In everyday life, it's common to confuse these two movements. Silence may seem easier, a quick escape from everything that frightens us. But inner retreat is different. It requires courage. It's like closing your eyes to hear the sound of your own heart. A sound Chico Xavier knew well, because he understood that in retreat lies the key to inner peace. To stay silent can seem like a sign of strength, but often it's only fear in disguise. Retreat, on the other hand, is an invitation to tenderness. It's like stepping into a dark room and instead of turning on the light, learning to feel the invisible texture of the darkness. And in that subtle touch, we discover a truth words can never reach. That truth teaches us that when we retreat within, we become able to see beyond the obvious. Because when the noise stops, the soul begins to speak. Chico Xavier understood this better than anyone. Spirituality doesn't need grand speeches. It flourishes in silence, in the gentle retreat that reconnects us with who we truly are. This lesson echoes deeply, for staying silent may only be an absence of sound, but inner retreat is total presence. A gesture that allows us to dialogue with our own pain and, little by little, find the emotional healing that grows from that quiet conversation. And in understanding this difference, we free ourselves from the chains of fear. Because retreat isn't isolation, it's expansion. It's the moment when, without saying a word, we affirm our presence in the world. And so, we discover that inner peace doesn't depend on what the world expects of us, but on what we choose to be in our own silence. But there's one detail that changes everything. Inner retreat isn't a final point, but an invitation to the next step, the exercises that nurture that healing silence. 5. Exercises to cultivate healing silence. In the inner silence, we find not just a refuge, but a gateway to transformation. Chico Xavier left us precious lessons on how to nurture that serenity. He knew that inner peace doesn't appear by chance. It's like a seed that needs to be watered every day. That's why the practice of healing silence demands both discipline and surrender. It's like tending to a secret garden that only blooms when we're patient. One of the simplest yet most powerful exercises is conscious breathing. Breathing in slowly and deeply, feeling the air as a balm that renews the body and soothes the mind. Each exhale becomes a gentle release, a sigh of emotional healing. Chico Xavier said that in that calm rhythm, spirituality reveals itself, not as something distant, but as a living part of who we are. Another path is meditation, even if only for a few minutes a day. It doesn't require elaborate techniques, just the decision to be fully present. closing our eyes, silencing both external and internal noise, and listening to the beat of our own life. In that moment, healing silence becomes an invisible cloak that surrounds us, bringing comfort and clarity. There are also simple practices, like walking in nature, feeling the texture of the leaves beneath your feet, the scent of wet earth, the gentle song of birds. Chico Xavier understood that spirituality isn't separate from life. It reveals itself in small things, in the touch of the wind on your skin, or the warmth of a sunbeam breaking through the clouds. Another profound exercise is silent writing, letting words flow like a river, without judgment, without rush. Writing what we feel, what we fear, what we long for. In that process, emotional healing happens naturally because we give voice to what we so often hold in our chests. And so, inner peace stops being just an ideal. It becomes a living experience. These exercises find fertile ground to bloom. They are practices that, though silent, speak more loudly than any word. And each gesture, each breath, becomes a reminder that spirituality lives in the present, in the moment when we choose to be fully here. But perhaps the most important of all these exercises is learning to listen. To listen to our own emotions without censorship. To listen to the breath, to the heartbeat. And in that subtle dialogue with the soul, to discover that silence isn't empty. It's full of meaning. It reminds us that even in the midst of chaos, there's always a place of calm where we can find ourselves. And it's precisely at this point that everything comes together, because in the end, healing silence is just the beginning of a journey that Chico Xavier invites us to take. A journey that goes beyond words, beyond promises, and that reveals itself in the soft sound of our own breath. And then, everything makes sense. In the silence we cultivate, in the deep listening we learn with Chico Xavier, we discover something that has always been there, something we've stubbornly ignored. Life beats to the rhythm of inner silence. Each pause, each heartbeat, reminds us that emotional healing isn't something that comes from outside. It is born in the moment we accept emptiness as fullness. But are we truly ready to accept this? The healing silence, lessons from Chico Xavier, invites us to turn inward, to recognize that the answers we seek are not in the noise of the world, but in the quiet that resides within our thoughts. It's in that silence that inner peace blossoms, like a seed that is reborn whenever we allow ourselves to pause, to breathe, and to listen to what the soul has been waiting to tell us all along. Perhaps this is the most profound lesson that Chico Xavier left us, that spirituality isn't made of grand words, but of simple gestures, of listening to others, of listening to ourselves, of nurturing the emotional healing that arises when we accept silence as a faithful companion. Because deep down, it's within that silence that the truth we've always sought lies waiting. Now, let this reflection echo within you. What does that silence awaken in your heart? How can it transform your daily life, your relationships, your fears? Share in the comments which of these practices resonated most deeply with you, or tell us how silence has already helped you reconnect with yourself. Each experience becomes a flame that lights the way for all of us. And if you wish to dive even deeper into this journey, I'll leave you here above a video that continues this conversation. After all, silence isn't the end. It's the start of a new chapter. I'll see you there, because the discovery has only just begun.